Thanks, my Bisbee.
Ham and cheese
Great.
with tomato. Because they ain't no more turkey.
Thanks. Come on. Fucking so slow. All right. Live from New York. It's what, Thursday afternoon. On the road. This is the first office hours for the Cork. This one is public. I was going to make it unlisted, but for some reason that wasn't working, and it doesn't really matter. But this one will be public. It'll be easier to find for the people that are in the Cork, and it'll be kind of, perhaps in retrospect, a little illustrative of what goes on in the Cork. And I'll stay on here as long, half an hour maybe or more, depending if anyone shows up. But I just want this to be a regular offering that you get as part of the Cork. I'm going to go over a few things right off the top of my head. And that is if you've completed Chapter 1 and the introduction and Chapter 1 exercises and you're right up to date, and I think half of you are. I think there's 3 people that have completed all the exercises that are available thus far. Although I said previously you get your the things you've earned today, I'm going to actually distribute them tomorrow. So when you get the new Chapter 2 and its resources and exercises is also when I will email you all the things that you've earned. And so far there are 4 things I think that you get. There's 2 appendices and there's 2 unannounced bonuses, perhaps, or they weren't unannounced necessarily, but things I'm giving you. One is kind of just like a interesting thing that I discovered that relates to JAWS, and the other one you already know about perhaps, but you'll see you'll get the first bit of it, let's say, plus the 2 appendices, one for the introduction and one for Chapter 1. And then you'll also get Chapter 2, of course, if it comes out tomorrow, whether you've completed them or not. Everyone in the Cork will get Chapter 2 and its resources and exercises. So don't feel like you need to have it all done today. Obviously, half of you don't. Don't feel bad about that. If you've already gone through a majority or half the exercises, you already know that people who take it more slowly are set up for success. Other people may find it easier, harder. There's a few exercises, of course, where you have to travel outside of your, outside of your house. And maybe some people haven't found time to do that. Of course, that will be an ongoing thing. I'm sure you can see where this is going to lead to if you've thought about it, whatsoever. So tomorrow is when you'll get the things that you've earned from completing all the exercises. So if you've completed all the exercises to date, which is introduction and Chapter 1, you will get those prizes, for lack of a better term, tomorrow at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time when I release Chapter 2 and send that out. So the 3 people so far, and maybe more by tomorrow, who have completed the exercises will get those prizes. If you have any questions, concerns, as you can see along the bottom here, these office hours are provided, so we can chat, or I can answer questions about the exercises. Maybe you're unclear on exactly what to do. An example of this may be one person for sure had trouble uploading stuff to Google Drive. It's probably best if you create a folder in your Google Drive. Every Gmail account comes with a free Google Drive. You just have to go into the little icons in the corner where all the Google apps are when you're in your Gmail. It's like a little box with, I think, like 9 little dots maybe that make a box, and that's where all the apps are in the upper right hand corner. And then you just have to go to Drive. You get a folder, create a new folder in your Drive, and then all the stuff that now you can get fancy about it and put it, label it like intro stuff, whatever. But it's better if you just throw it all in that one folder. and just send me the link, to the things, or even just to the folder. Because if you send a link to the whole folder, I'll have access to everything that's in that folder and keeps getting put into that folder going forward. So that might be the easiest way to do it for you. Other people have emailed me things when they couldn't, when stuff wouldn't upload to Google Drive for whatever reason. People have just emailed me directly some of the 5-day thinking exercises with the knives and the glasses. Uh, I did all those exercises myself the week before the courk started. Uh, some of those are pretty challenging, actually. You got to really think about it. And it was interesting how they built from one to the other. So those may be causing you some problems. And there's no shame if you can, give it the old college try. And then I will eventually send you the answers to those as well. Because there are not just, a few of them have multiple ways of doing stuff. But I'll send you the answers. For the people who have completed it, I will send you the answers. The feedback that I'm going to give will be in the form of a podcast, I think is sort of what I settled on. I was going to I'll give individual feedback. But from what I've seen so far of the people that are going through the exercises, they're stumbling on the same issues. So it may be best just to record a podcast where I talk about the individual exercises. And then you'll get that as part of the courk, of course. When you complete it, that will be one of the things. So I've sort of thought maybe I'd do it individually because there's not a ton of people doing the courk, obviously. But it might be best if people are stumbling on the same things to just record it as a one podcast and send it to everybody who completes the exercises. I think that might be the best way to do it going forward. And then you'll have that record too. It's not something, that you may lose because I just send you an email or we talk in person or whatever. Or I may do it individually if I think it warrants it for, some things that don't apply to everybody. Maybe I'll do it individually. I want you to get the best feedback. I want you to get it, this weekend. I'll be out of commission. I'll be in New York City. But starting early next week when we return to where we're staying, I'm going to start doling out some feedback for the people who have completed the exercises. And as more people complete them, hopefully once I make that one podcast for those first intro and chapter number 1, then I can send it. To whoever, and then that will be part of everything going forward. Will be those little podcasts where I talk about everything. And so the podcast plus some of the answers which will come in a PDF probably, some answers to some of those 5-day thinking exercises and maybe other exercises I can't think of off the top of my head. I don't remember what all the exercises are off the top of my head either. So what I am impressed about, though, first, I'd like to say is how the people that have done the exercises, completed all the exercises to date for intro and chapter 1, they've really, got stuck in. I don't think I anticipated people doing it that aggressively, going into it. That's the way I would probably go into it. That's the way I went into it when I took a coding course through Stanford here a while ago. I just, went right into it and just got her done. I made it like a daily thing. And that's really one of the exercises, of course, is to keep a calendar and try to not break that chain, every day work on the courk. Don't break the chain. The Jerry Seinfeld idea is where I first heard it, of the unbroken chain. And it's been really helpful. I apply it to everything I do now. I do, since January, I've been reading 2 short stories a day. I think I'm only 9 away from 1,000 now. So in the next 3 or 4 days, I'll get to 1,000 short stories that I'll have read. I started reading 2 a day in January, so I'd get to 1,000 by midsummer. Then I'll probably go back to reading 1 a day because I've read most of the ones I've ever wanted to read, kind of thing, or ferreted out some of the best ones. It is surprising how little, I will say, of the 1,000. I don't know what the percentage is now. I'm gonna have to calculate it when I get to 1,000. Originally, I calculated it was somewhere in the 20% range or less. There's like 19.3% of the short stories were actual stories, actually qualified as stories. You know, a lot of short stories and a lot of novels, a lot of films are just like a mood or a amorphous, slapdashery. I think, which I've said before somewhere. They're not really a story, and there's no structure to it. There's no real climax. There's no three acts. All these type things where the people have just basically, you know, almost like free associated random things together and called it a story, which of course it is not. And as we're trying to learn here, it's a much different animal once you get into it, but it's a much better way of doing things, and it's a lot more helpful. Some of the podcasts I've forced you to listen to in the exercises in the introduction in chapter 1 exercises, Brian McDonald refers to how when people are trying to write, create, like a short story or a screenplay or something, they're trying to think about what could happen, and that's not really what you do when you write a story. You're trying to think about what should happen, because you have the armature statement as the sign post to where you're supposed to be going. And so when you have decided upon an armature statement before you begin, it gives you a lot of the information. And in the next few coming chapters, we're going to start tackling some of those ideas of like, what information does it give you? Because it tells you very distinctive things. And then that provides those structural elements as to how you can proceed. And then you're no longer thinking like, what random event, okay, could the character go here or whatever? It's like, no, they have to go here. They have to go in this direction. Because that's what it's about, right? And without that structure, people do not do well with their writing. Because when you really think about it, I'm not going to go too deep into this in either the courk or right now. But really, the idea armature is a much grander idea than people think. And the more you learn about it, the deeper the well goes. What's that famous, is it like in Portugal or something? There's that famous blue hole or something where it goes, in the sea where people dive and stuff. It's kind of like that. I think of that when I think of armature, because it's like, it's so spread out. As you'll see in chapter 2, when I start to talk about other arts that have this in common, which is basically every art, anything I would call art, the depth of it is incredible. It just keeps going on seemingly forever. And it's my 11th year studying using armature. And I learn new stuff all the time. All the time. It's undoubtedly a lifelong pursuit. And as a result, there's no rush. But you also have to have standards. You can't just continue to perform pointless tricksterism. That's dead. If you're in this courk or you're thinking about joining this courk, you're seeing this. Tricksterism is dead. It's been killed. It was killed a few years ago. Almost nobody in magic realizes it, but they're extinct. It's over. And people who find the very few sources going forward that you can draw you into this, then to this way of thinking, to this armaturic thematic way of thinking, you almost can't go back. I mean, people can still do it, of course, if they wish, but it really bothers people, which I love. I really like that, because it really bothered me when I first learned about it. I was like dumbstruck, but I was also like, wow, this is crazy. Like I couldn't see it, right? As you're struggling to see right now. And that's really the first step. You know, people, I think in some of the questions in the introduction or chapter one, people, you know, there's a space where you can say, do you have any questions or is there anything you want to know? And people are quick to say like, well, I don't know how to put, you know, a show together yet, or I don't know how to match an armature statement with a trick or what, you know, stuff like this. And you shouldn't be rushing towards that necessarily right now. We're gonna stair step our way towards that. But what you should really be focusing on right now is seeing the things that I've forced you to watch, read, copy out by hand in some cases. These are the things that you need to focus on, because if you can't just have something put down in front of you, look at it, read through it, think about it, read through it a couple times, view it a couple times, 3, 4, 5 times. Uh, and going forward, this will be, you know, we're going to be more aggressive in this regard as to forcing you to rewatch, reread, blah, blah, right? Because that's what you need to do. Because until you can see it, until I can put something down in front of you and you're like, oh, it's this. This is what it means. Then you can't even begin to take a trick and marry. I mean, you can start. We're going to start trying to do that. But you have to be able to see first. Because once you're able to see with new eyes how armature works, then not only will you be able to see it, but then you'll be able to see how other people did it. How these masterful people, Spielberg, Billy Wilder, Stephen King, Isaac Asimov, you know, a bunch of unknown people, Mary Shelley too, a bunch of unknown people, Guy de Maupassant, the French writer. A lot of people you never read or never, but until you can have something put down in front of you, you can decipher it because you understand how armature works. Then you won't be able to see the different ways that they represented armature in each story, all the different angles they took, and like, because that really helped me, as I saw, especially with films, learning from Spielberg and Billy Wilder. It was really like, oh, this is like another way, and it really got me thinking. There is of course, as you go along, you're going to get some piecemeal pieces of a big interview I did with Brian McDonald. I interviewed him for almost 3 hours, and as you complete the exercises, you will get pieces of this. I've sort of chopped it up into like 20, 15 or 20-minute chunks, I think, and you'll get these as you complete some of the chapters. But in there somewhere, we talked about this, and one of the things I did a poor job explaining what I'd done, I think, in the interview, so be warned. But one of the things I had thought about once I got deeper into armature, and I was writing a book of short stories that is tentatively titled "What Would a Lion Do," and will come out at some point. But one of the things, I had this story, and so I think I couldn't remember what the whole armature statement was when I was talking to Brian, because it was off the top of my head and it just sort of came about randomly. But the armature statement for this particular short story I wrote was that the wicked flee when none pursue, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. Okay, that was the armature statement. And this short story was based on something that happened to me in real life, and that's how I arrived. I was looking for armature statements to represent the real life event that I experienced, and then I translated that into an armature statement, and then I translated that into a short story using a sort of classic device of animals in the place of the people, like you would in what some people call fables or fairy tales and whatnot. And so one of the things I thought about in regards to another way to represent wickedness fleeing when nobody's chasing you, when none pursue, and the righteous being like a lion. Well, the wicked, the antagonist of the short story is the wicked person fleeing when nobody pursues them. So one of the things I thought about, which was hard when it comes to like putting into prose, because you're just working with you're not really working with visuals, right? It's just like words. So you're painting pictures with words. But one idea I had was to make the dialogue of that character run away, essentially. So get less as this. So every time that person speaks, at the beginning they're verbose, and at the end they don't speak at all. And it does this, the whole way through. Less, 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 less. So in essence, the words themselves are running away unchased. And I used other characters to help try to point out the fact that this person's choosing to use less and less words just solely on their own accord, not because anyone's trying to silence them or anything. So that is an example. I would say an advanced example, because I've never seen anyone do that. But that idea solely came to me because I was thinking about the armature statement, and I was trying to figure out how to represent that in the story. What's another angle? There's a physical running away, which happened in real life and happens in the story. But other things, if they're wicked, are they going away, unpursued? So that's what Brian means when he's talking about, if you're got your armature statement, the things that you come up with for your stories feel like discoveries. They don't feel like they just came. It's not random, obviously, because you're thinking armature statement. How do I say that in a different way? How do I say the same thing in like 30 different ways? That's essentially what you're doing when you're coming up with a presentation that's an armature, right? So you're going to represent it. I think it was one of the people who's taking the courk pointed out correctly that Michael Weber, on the podcast when I interviewed Michael Weber, he talked about his presentation for any carded a number, let's say. I can't remember if it was any card. I can't remember what the exact thing was. But the armature, the statement was basically, we need each other. Right? Now, the way Michael Weber did it was fine. Because it did point up through the actions of what was done how you'd put that into a presentation, how you take that armature statement and you make a presentation out of it. Because it literally required him and the other person to do the things to arrive at the card, right? And the position. So that's a great example in a way. But what I would say is I felt like it could have been embellished with more examples of the same thing. Like you could easily make that into a longer presentation where more examples are given for we need each other. Because that's what you would be thinking if you're trying to turn that into if Michael Weber's presentation was what you were thinking of, you'd want more examples of that. So then you'd be trying to come up with ideas. So like every aspect of that trick, and there may only be several steps, so then you've exhausted that aspect. But even when you're saying thinking of a card, anytime some selection or you need to make something or make a choice in that presentation is an opportunity for to impress upon the person that you both need to make that choice together. because that further reinforces the idea that we need each other. So in terms of Weber's presentation, it's almost like an Aesop fable, very short sort of version, I would say. You could embellish that and extend that in different ways that he hadn't considered. I don't know. But there's I can think of like 3 or 4 just off the top of my head, that you could do. And that would reinforce, because you're just repeating that idea 3 or 4 more times in the span of that effect. That's going to ram home the idea, which is what you want. Once you learn to see armature, what you'll notice is that it seems, when you're on the creative side of it and not the audience side of it, when you're the one trying to backwards engineer these things and decipher them and then see them for what they are, see all the cogs and wheels and chains and levers and stuff, you will see it seems very blatant once you're able to see it. There's an element where it's almost like too on the nose, but then you show it to people and no one can see it. That's why I've made the argument in the past that armature is the most magical tool that has ever been created, ever been conceived of, because it's literally powering every aspect of the thing, right? It's given rise to every element in the film, let's say, if we're talking about a film, but nobody can see it, right? It's just, it has this emotional effect instead of an intellectual effect. And that's gonna be a fight for some of you taking this courk, because you're so in your head, and magic itself, small m magic, puts you in your head, because it's all technical stuff. It's not emotional. So if you probably come to magic because you're interested in technical aspects. And a lot of people in magic, I feel, are way on that side of things. They are like super interested in technical things, but they have their emotional connectedness to the world is, limited. And so for some of you, that will be harder, because you're going to have trouble getting out of your head. You're going to have trouble thinking and just learning to, this is how people, things resonate emotionally with people, right? Because a lot of tricksters, magicians, a lot of tricksters want credit. It's like they're like subliminally trying to get the audience to give them credit for all their years of toil with these esoteric techniques and methods. If I had $1 for every person I met that's like that in the magic community, I might not be here doing this. I'll be on an island sipping pina coladas that I owned, the island. So that is something some of you are going to probably be fighting with, is the over intellectualization of everything and getting out of your head. And that's why some of these exercises I made force you to go outside your house, go to the open mic, and we're going to start to escalate some of this stuff. Because one of the things I cannot stress enough about learning armature is, and especially as it applies to magic, but as it applies to tons of things, you got to do the thing. So when it comes to magic, you've got to perform. You can't stay in your house and perform for strangers. It's impossible. Unless you invite them over, I guess. But you could do that, But mostly, if you're not just going to go right out on the street like I did, which is an option, but also you go to these open mics, and once you have started to flesh out, the very basic armature that an effect is, you're going to be doing it at the open mic. You got to. There's no other way to really learn it. And several people, of course, who've completed the exercises so far have sent me them a video of themselves doing their favorite trick. And already I've noticed, I think in every case that I've seen, so all three cases so far, which that will probably require some individual feedback, the way they've orchestrated it could be vastly improved. Like just Di Vernon is famous for saying, talking about, if you've ever seen those, I think that the DVDs now are downloadable streaming videos, the Revelation series with Di Vernon. And they talk about Erdnase on there, and they talk about gambling moves and stuff like this, and the center deal and that whole thing. But one of the things you hear Vernon repeat over and over again, and in other instances, is like, how do you get into it? How do you get out of it? And that's something that probably Vernon's the only person I ever heard in Magic talk about that, and he didn't extrapolate. He just put that as like a dictum, like no good. If you have to do a bunch of shit at the gambling table, no good. But it also applies to Magic, going beyond what Vernon even said. It applies to, there's a uniformity of things that has to occur if you're going to make it as powerful as possible. And a lot of people are just doing the trick, even the method and the technique. They're just doing it how they learned it in the book or in the video. They've not really given any thought to choreographing it in a different way. In a way that, and ultimately, which basically nobody in Magic does that I've ever seen, very few, because they don't have a presentation. Like 99.9% of the people in Magic don't have presentations. They don't choreograph the moves and the stuff with the presentation, with how they're going to move, like with the blocking and the choreography. That should also be a part of the moves you choose, the way you do them, when you do them. It's kind of all those same things that Erdnase says in the book, but don't apply to gambling. They apply to Magic, which is like about changing the moment that you do something. In the famous Max Malini quote about if someone's staring at your hands, how do you wait? And he says, I wait a week or whatever, right? It's like a classic thing that he probably never said, maybe. But the lesson is true, right? You change the moment on something. Not necessarily because someone's looking at your hands, but the moments of when you're doing things should be choreographed to the blocking and choreography of the presentation. But the way most people do it, they just do the moves like they did out of the book, and it's just, it's these sequence of moves I'm supposed to do, and they give zero consideration to the presentation because they usually don't have any. And so that is a big oversight. That's like the oversight, basically, outside of armature. That's the oversight. Your presentation and the techniques and the method have to be, intertwined seamlessly. And that even goes into like how you do the moves. Not literally can you do the technique, but when and how you do it, right? That's every aspect of it is infused so that it's completely unified. Nobody does that. So we're going to work on some of that too, and that will require individual feedback. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably set up some short feedback sessions with everybody in the courk. When people complete the chapters, I'll set up a feedback session, and we'll talk about their individual stuff, in regards to their tricks. Now, for those people who've completed it, this is no big deal, but I'm going to just if you haven't completed all the exercises, you won't know this yet, so I'm just going to make it known. The first exercise, the first introductory exercises is one where I just have you select your favorite month. The reason I did that is because I wanted some sort of randomization generated by you. And what I did is I made an index of a bunch of Magic books. And whatever month you chose, I'm going to assign you a trick out of that book. that you're going to learn from scratch. And this will be one of the tricks that you're going to progress with throughout the entire courk. And the one you're probably going to do at the open mic. And then you're going to see, as we move from chapter to chapter, and we do a little bit more, how to infuse that effect, how to turn that effect into an armature, and then how to extend that armature into either a whole show, right? Or make individual armatures, individual tricks into different armatures if you so desire. Because those are sort of the two ways you could do it. So I think that's important, because ultimately you want to, I think the goal, my goal, is not only to get you to see, which you're going to do along the way, but you also need to work on some things in an effort to put these into action, which I think they'll reinforce each other, hopefully. Because that's sort of the way I did it, is when I created my street show, I sort of had this show that was kind of like clunky hodgepodge of things. And then the more I bent, because it was already I already had something that existed in a way, I started to bend everything, to armature, because I put the cart before the horse. And then I had to cut things because they didn't represent the armature statement, right? And I had to add things because the stuff I had in there didn't represent the armature statement. Right? So these two corresponding tracks of like learning to see by watching, reading, consuming media, short stories, films, plays. We're going to read some plays upcoming. And taking a trick and an armature statement and marrying these two things together. These are the things you have to look forward to. And I don't think we have any questions so far. I can see maybe some questions will arise. If you have a question, drop it in the chat. If I don't get it to it now, I'll respond to it via email. Other than that, I think we're sort of come to an end. We've been for about, well, it's 1:40, but I started a bit later than 1. Well, 35, 40 minutes. So if there's no questions, and there's no sense going much longer than this. But these will always be the day before the next chapter comes out, from now until basically the end of the year. And going forward from here, the prizes for completing the exercises will always be given on the day the new chapter comes out. We're just going to make it easy. Because I'm on the road right now, so I don't always have access to everything. Because we're doing, it's not my house, we got family and we're interacting with and whatnot, and we're out doing stuff. It's summertime, which other people are out doing stuff. So we'll try to just do it on one day, where you get the stuff you've earned through doing the exercises and also get the new chapter. So tomorrow, 1 Central Standard Time, chapter 2 comes out. If you have any further questions, concerns, you want clarification, my email, of course, is at d'Artagnanmagic, d'Artagnanmagic@gmail.com. So you can email me. If you're not in the Cork and you're seeing this, contact me at d'Artagnanmagic@gmail.com and I'll send you the way you can get involved with this. We're basically a 6-month course where we're learning how to do actual magic instead of just trickery and deception, like the normal tricksters in the magic community. And without any questions, then that's it for today. That's the first office hours. You guys are doing great, by the way. That's one thing I wanted to emphasize. I did, and I talked about it a bit earlier. You guys are killing it. I mean, half the people done the first 2 chapters exercises already, and 2 of those people were done, like, I think at the first week. Like, they just went boom right into it and crushed those exercises. Went out, got those photos, the handwriting stuff, whatever. They just went full force into it. Send me the pictures of their calendar, with the crossed off every day they've worked on the cork, blah, blah, blah. What I would encourage you to do too is, if you complete the exercises before the 3 weeks before the new chapter comes out, go back reread, rewatch everything until the next chapter comes out. That's one thing you can do for extra credit. And coming up, I think it's in chapter 3 maybe, but it might be in chapter 2, I can't remember. That will be an exercise. So, and that will start to increase as we go. So you can just jump on the wagon, and if you're not done the first introduction and chapter 1 exercises, then no rush, but also you don't want to fall too far behind probably, because then you won't have these office hour things to be able to ask questions. So if you stay on track timetable where you're not falling that far behind, these office hours things can be more beneficial to you because they'll be more pertinent at that given moment for stuff you're working on at that time. All right, great. You guys keep up the amazing work. You're really killing it. I've got much different expectations now. Maybe I'm not raising them up too high, but you guys have exceeded my expectations already. And you have my, respect for really trying to work at this diligently and persevering and getting all these, crazy exercises I'm making you do. Pictures, uploading them, sending them to me, whatever. You're doing an amazing job. Keep up the good work. I feel like this 6 months can really turn you into a completely different kind of performer, and one that takes your audience, the responsibility you have for your audience seriously, and leaves your audiences better than you found them. All right. Until 3 weeks and a day from now, when the next office hours, or 3 weeks from now, when the next office hours starts, I will talk to you then, if not sooner, over email. Ta-ta for now.